Thad.
Kyle.
So we have a mutual friend. His name is Mark, and you will have seen him because he's our first ever episode for this interview sort of series that we're doing. And he said something to you the other day that you might have missed. It was during our last get together, not the one that we just had last night because he wasn't there.
Mhm.
Shame on him.
Yep.
But we had like 8 or 10 people at the house. He met you for the very first time, shook your hand, and he said, "So you must be the person who got Kyle into Magic. Thank you for that."
Yeah.
So my question for you is, how does it feel being the person responsible for my poor financial decisions?
Honestly, it feels pretty great because I live vicariously. It's like you're my magic son. I live vicariously through you. So watching you spend all the money on all the magic cards, and I get to see all the cool ones in person and get to use them in your decks. Feels pretty good, to be honest. I have no regrets personally.
Well, it's interesting because this game has really transformed my life. I mean, hence the channel now and like what we're doing with it. But it wouldn't have happened unless you had sort of stepped in at that time. And I really want to go back and explore a little bit of sort of where you started and then eventually get into more so my origin with you. Because it was actually, I mentioned it in one of my videos, if y'all have watched, that it was this room, actually, before it was all done up and pretty, that we started playing in.
Yeah, it
And
was.
we had our little Niv Mizzet 100 game series duels in here.
Oh, some bad memories there.
So I guess in terms of where you started playing MTG, was it your brother or who got you into the game? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so personally for me, my brother was big, like a really big person, really important to me my entire life, and he was in Tennessee for most of it. He's 15 years older. When I was 3 is when he moved away. He ended up moving back around like my 7th or 8th grade year, and we started spending more and more time with each other, and he wanted to introduce me to a game that he played in high school back in like, which would have been like 98 through 2002.
Mm-hmm.
So he took me to a game store, and I bought one of the
Precons.
it wasn't even a precon. It was the 2-pack starter kit thing.
Right.
It was actually the set the set that came out that year of that pack that I got was, I think it's the first Theros, probably the one with Whip of Erebos, Decay.
That would probably make sense around that time. Yeah.
So that was the first thing that I ever got. It was the Abhorrent Overlord and Stormtide Leviathan were the 2 cards on the front. So basically, I bought that. I bought some Lord of the Rings sleeves. One had Sauron, one had the One Ring, and we took it back. He had an Elves deck.
Yeah.
A 60 card modern Elves deck, and we just play it for hours at a time. And then one day, I don't remember exactly how it happened. I think one of his buddies that he was hanging out with introduced him to Commander. So then we started playing together, and then we went to Millennium Games and bought, man, I cannot remember the name of the one that I bought, but we went halvesies on Atraxa and another one.
Was this the precon this time?
Yes, this was a precon.
Do you remember the game store that you first went to? Do you know which one that was, or was it too distant of a memory?
So I had been to Millennium Games ever since I was like 8, on and off. And then there's another one in my area called the Nerd Store, and that was the one where I bought that first modern starter kit.
Is that store still around now, or is it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Have you been back to it since?
I went back in 2019, 2020. I can't remember, but I bought a booster box of War of the Spark from there.
Yeah.
But most of the time now I'll head to Millennium just because it was a little closer.
Sure. And Millennium Games, for everyone watching, is a Rochester/Henrietta, New York based store. Now the largest game store in the world. They actually moved locations recently. So nostalgically, Millennium Games is significant for me too, but not for MTG reasons. It was nostalgic for me for D&D reasons. So I was in there a lot grabbing minis with my friend Austin throughout all of my college time, and I didn't get to necessarily live that heavy MTG lifestyle, you know, like walk in with all like they have like these cases that you flip up in there and everything. It's very, you know, official, I guess you would say. And it's interesting being that person who can walk in there and appreciate everything. Cause I didn't care, you know, I was just there for like the D&D minis, but there's this whole other side of the hobby I was just missing, and I'm walking right past it every time to go to the D&D minis. So tell me also about like your first experience with Commander, because clearly you and your brother went have these on the Atraxa deck. And was that like, how did you split that deck? Was it you only played it? Did you and your brother share it? How did that work?
So he already had a Commander deck, I believe. I could not tell you what it was. I think maybe it was, I think the name of the Commander is Goreclaw. It's a bear.
Oh yeah.
I think that was the one that he was running.
Is that like the mono green Commander?
Yeah,
Maybe?
yeah. So I think that was the one he had. I don't fully remember. But then like my whole family went that day to Millennium, and that's when we got Atraxa, and I thought, well, okay, he saw Atraxa and he thought it was absolutely a crazy Commander. So I was like, oh yeah, I'll throw in the other $20 that mom and dad gave me after I bought the other one. I don't know, it was some dragon that gives +1+, I don't know. But that was the one that I got. And so coming back, I played Atraxa most of the time. He played it on and off, but he would play his Commander deck that I really have no idea what it was. I'd have to ask him, but I basically played it, and then when he moved back to where he was most of my young life, he took it with him just because he paid most of the deck value for it.
Right. But Atraxa is like significant to you because you've mentioned building it multiple times since then. So clearly like this period of time was really meaningful to you. Maybe it was your brother, maybe it's the hobby. Do you think it's more of one or the other, or was it the combination? What do you think?
I don't know. It was probably a combination. You know, I loved my brother. I love my brother. And it's not like he's gone. That guy. But being able to, because we weren't super close. Like I was the annoying young sibling.
Yeah, sure.
Growing up, like I remember when I was like 3 before I moved 3, 4, I'd go up and watch him play like Super Mario Bros. Or like the Amazing Spider-Man on PS2, right? But that was kind of like the only time we really hung out. So having Magic as an avenue for us to hang out, and we'd go work out together too.
Yeah.
So we'd like go to the gym. I remember we'd go to the gym, we'd come back, shower, and then play Magic.
Yeah.
And Commander is really when I started enjoying it, because I just enjoyed all the interaction. I loved getting the tracks out, making everything huge, and then swinging
plus
at
one
them.
counters.
Yep. So, yeah, and that deck was my absolute favorite I think I've ever played to this day.
I think you touched on something that's like really core for me when I'm playing MTG, because a lot of the time when I'm playing Magic, I'm not necessarily playing it for the game itself, although I love the game. I think it's a beautiful game. I'm playing because it's the people that I want to be with at that time, and it's such a great excuse to get together with other people and play, because otherwise there's many situations where you wouldn't actually be with those people, right? Because you know, life gets in the way. I mean, you're still finishing up your last years of college here, but once you're, you know, out and working, it becomes significantly harder in a lot of ways, not to mention when children become involved, like some of our friends have. And they otherwise, our friends who have kids and jobs, all that kind of stuff, probably wouldn't be able to be here if they didn't have a carved out time to actually sit down and be with those people. So I think that's something that's just so beautiful about this game. And that's also what I look forward to, especially with hopefully traveling in the future to like Magic cons and fests and all that stuff, is actually like meeting people and playing with them, because to me that's, you know, that's what's most important.
Yeah, and something that's becoming clear, and I actually just had a very long conversation with one of my friends from college about it, is being a part of something. Like for our whole lives leading up to this, like I play soccer in college, I've always been a part of a group, right? And right now, he expressed to me his problem, it just like why he's feeling extra sad right now is because he doesn't feel like he has a group to be a part of. And, you know, playing D&D, playing Magic, and then my other hobbies. Yes, I'm sad about leaving the sport that I've loved, but I don't feel as empty as I think he does. Because I know that I still look forward to game nights, and I will always have a group of people that I can come back to and enjoy my time with. And I also think that having, I guess I'll call it an excuse to get together, right? Because like, you know, you'll get together with one friend at a time, and most of the time now, like you're like, oh, what do we do? Oh, let's sit around. You know, not many people have ideas to do stuff every second of every single day, but in order like to get that big of a group together and being able to hang out with everyone, having the excuse of playing Magic, and like that, not only is it a reason for them to come, but it gives us something that we all enjoy to be able to do together. And I mean, yesterday when we played, I think we ended up playing for like 6 hours.
Yeah, it was like
and
6 hours.
Honestly, it felt like maybe 2.
Yeah.
Straight up, it felt like 2.
We're fortunate too, because the people that we have in our group has been like slowly built up over the course of like 2 years. And so it hasn't just been like an overnight thing where we just invited people willy-nilly. It was like private recommendations to like other people who eventually got into the group. And I think that goes a really long way, because if you show up at your local game store, there's a really good chance you're going to get not the greatest experience. Let me just put it that way. So I think we're fortunate in that regard too. But I think that it's sort of like you attract what you put off, right? And so I mentioned on the channel before, like I've been to like Millennium game nights. I mean, maybe like 100 times. I don't know. It's been a lot over the last couple of years I've gone. Sometimes I go multiple times a week. I used to, at least. Not as much anymore. And that is, I think, what allowed me to build up, you know, the group, because Mark, who you guys have seen on the channel now, he is somebody who I would have never met unless we happenstance went to the same opening night for like a pre-release. And that was the only time he had been up here, because he had moved up from New York City. And so if I chose not to go to that game night, him and I may have never met. And then some of the other people in our group would never be involved. It's just crazy how that sort of like cascades, but it's just the individual recommendation. And we have a great group now, I think.
Yeah, so. Definitely. Yeah, that's one thing that I wanted to commend you on and like congratulate you, is that, you know, since I'm back and forth from college, you know, we only get to see each other once a month, sometimes maybe 2 times a month. But I came back my first time, and then all of a sudden we had this really fun group of people to play with. And I had a very good time the first time I met everyone. So I wanted to honestly thank you and congratulate you for being able to put together a group like we have.
Thank you. I'm glad that you're, because you're dating somebody right now. I'm glad that person also likes to play Magic. It makes a big difference, because my fiance, she loves MTG. I mean, I guess that she loves winning, maybe. And now that I think about it, maybe we should just play competitive with her. But she loves MTG, and like when she loses or has a bad experience, it doesn't like completely throw her off. Like she's ready to go into the next one and play again. And I think in a similar manner, like the person that you're with now is very appreciative of the game itself, but also, you know, the people that she surrounds herself with. So I think that you found a good one there.
Yeah, so do I. Absolutely.
So let's go back to you playing Commander with your brother,
Mm-hmm.
how long did that period last? Because when we started playing, like in this room,
Mm-hmm.
you had mentioned to me, and you may not remember this, that it had been possibly years since you had played before that. And we actually, I don't know if you remember this, we had to call your brother during our games
Yeah.
and be like, hey man, like, how does this rule work?
Yeah.
You know?
I do remember that.
So how long, did you play for? And then how long was your hiatus from the game before you started to get back into it 2.5 years ago?
Okay. So you'll have to remind me. We started playing around COVID,
Mm-hmm.
like 2020, 2021, or 2020.
2020 probably.
Okay, so that would have been my senior year. So my brother moved back around my seventh grade, and then I think he moved away around ninth grade. I think going into ninth grade. So I would have been playing for about 2 years with him. I think there was definitely like a bell curve of a peak when we played. So I
Sure.
think maybe late 8th grade was when we played the most. Yeah, so basically at that ninth grade point, when he left, I had no one else to play with.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried getting multiple people into it, and it didn't really work out.
Yeah.
So it ended up going to the wayside. But I'd always make sure I'd bring my Magic decks when we went and visited him. So I was able to play maybe twice a year from ninth grade to senior year.
Mm-hmm.
All the while trying to get people interested in playing. So by the time we started playing, it had probably been, and then my senior year, I don't think I played at all because I hadn't seen my brother in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a point in time where I just had not played for a solid 8 to 12 months.
I want to hone in on this because I think this is maybe an experience that some people have, and I don't know if you're the same way, but like let's use D&D as an example because that one's even harder to get people together for schedules and everything, and it's a hard game, But I found for me personally, when I was going through droughts where I couldn't DM a campaign for people, I would either watch Critical Role or supplement it somehow, right?
Yes.
And so for the folks that are watching that might be in that situation where it's like they go a year and it's like I haven't even played Magic like in person with people, and that's my shit. Like I want to do that.
Yep. What
was it like for you when you were going through that long drought, and what was it like when you got to start playing it again, like routinely?
So through that period of the drought was when I started looking on YouTube for Magic content. And I stumbled across the Command Zone when they had like 30K subs.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty early on.
Yeah, that would have been like 20.
It was around like 2016, 2017.
17 probably.
So maybe the number's off for me if someone decides to check. But I feel like they were pretty small. And that's what I watched. I'd watch them play game nights so that way I could learn about more cards, how interactions worked. And then I watched the professor because back then I feel like they were maybe like the only two that I could find. So I'd watch the professor do box openings.
Yep.
And back when you could buy a box for $100 and then get your money's worth and just keep wheeling it until you don't pull enough. So that was always entertaining. But that's kind of how I satiated that hunger to want to play. And then it also led me into, wanting to buy more cards, build up my collection a little bit. And then sometimes I'd like look through my decks, take cards out, like play test it a little bit. With like I'd make a really crappy other commander deck, and then I'd play test the both of them.
Right.
So that's kind of how I satiated that until I was finally able to play again. And usually it would be I would play it and then I would watch more stuff and then it would fall off for me, and then I'd go and visit my brother again and then really enjoy playing it when I was there, watch more videos, and then have it fall off. And so when we first started playing it, I think I don't know, I must have been on the rise a little bit.
Sure.
I mean, I also knew that you liked D&D, so I was like, maybe finally I could have someone to play with.
Yeah.
So that was kind of why I thought of suggesting it to you.
Well, it's kind of interesting because in college was my first ever exposure to Magic the Gathering. So it was like my freshman year, and my roommate at the time, he was kind of a scummy guy. But you know, when you're in college and you're like locked in the same room with like one person for a majority of the semester, you just kind of like make things work. And like the one thing that we were able to find some common ground on was like certain games that we played, and one of those was MTG. And so like I think my first ever game was a twin-headed giant game.
Interesting. Okay.
And I just remember being like so perplexed by the game. And I think that this sort of speaks to the environment in which you learn in, because I immediately like bounced off of the game. Like I didn't fall in love with it in the same way I did when I reapproached it with you. Because when I reapproached it with you, it was just this new lens I was able to look at everything through. And it just became like this, I mean, cliche term, magical experience, you know? So I'm really happy that you did actually reach out to me.
Yeah.
You know, with just like a question. It was like some question. You're like, hey, like, do you think you would play MTG again? Or do you think have you ever played it? Something like that. And that was really what ignited it for me. So thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for, loving it so much that way I can actually play it now.
Yeah. Well, it's, some might say it's an addiction.
Yeah.
A really crippling financial
Yeah.
addiction. Someone please send help.
No, it's okay. Spend all of your money on Magic so that way I can watch.
That's what I do anyway. So we're good. Now, moving from there, let's start about when we actually played together. So once we start playing together, it was April 21, I think, because it's only been 2.5 years.
It must have been around then, because I had just made that Risk the Redeem deck, and boy, was it outmatched.
We're gonna go over some of your decks for sure, but it was around that time. I think it was April 21. I want to say almost for sure.
Probably
it's a significant date for me.
I was gonna say it was probably March or April. I remember it being in spring.
So you come over here, and I actually, I mentioned my college experience. I still had a couple decks from like 5 years prior, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so I was like, hey, I got these decks, like, because I think you were just trying to like go over cards with me, like you're putting them down the table, like this is a creature, that's what this does. This is a sorcery, that's what this does. But until the rubber meets the road, it's such a difficult game. So you were like, really, because I was kind of confused. I was asking a ton of questions. You're like, look, how about we just play? And so I rummaged around and I found those old decks, and that's what we played with. And I think that it was important for me to win the first couple of games because I was playing, I forget the set. It was I was playing a Hardened Scales Selesnya build and like a 40 card deck. It was one of those original starter packs, but I played the Hardened Scales deck and you had some hot garbage.
Yeah.
And you were such a good sport. You just let me dunk on you for like 10 games in a row. And then I was like, oh yeah, okay, I get this. And I'm sure back then, like, I didn't know how Hardened Scales really worked. The wording is so confusing. You know, it's like if one or more +1/+1 counters we put on this, that one +1 is put on instead. And I'm just like, so that means I get like 3, right? You know, like I have no idea how this works. But I think me winning those early games was important for me personally. But how do you view those like first couple games of like getting me into the game? Like from your perspective, was it just like I'm the teacher, I'm okay with me like getting crapped on by this guy, or how was that for you?
Yeah, I mean, that's also like how most games are for me personally. Like if I'm playing with people who haven't really played that much, especially with my decks now in Commander, I'll find myself like holding back. Like if I have interaction, I'm not gonna play it. Like it is not fun if you're new to the game and just getting your commander immediately taken out. You know, like if you're being introduced to the game, you want to see your cards go off. You want to see all the interaction happen because that's what's fun and that's what's gonna make you fall in love with the game. So, you know, when I'm teaching people the game, I don't really care if I lose.
Yeah.
Especially back then when I was really trying to find at least one person to play with.
You're like, please, God.
Yeah. Yeah, for real.
Yeah.
I did not care.
So that's your perspective, I suppose. And that was my perspective. And then what we decided to do, I think like you maybe stay the night and then we went to Millennium Games the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And then that was around the time of the Baldur's Gate release. Like the Battle for Baldur's Gate, I think had just come out.
Must have been. Maybe that was part of the way that I got you into it was the
D&D relation.
Yeah, the D&D draw.
I think a lot of people got in through that mechanism, actually.
Yeah.
Let me just PSA for everybody. I think that specific set was actually super good, and I think it's an undervalued set. But anyways, we went to Millennium, and I remember just sitting there agonizing over the choices because there was like 20 precons, and I was like, bro,
yeah,
I don't know what I want. And like some of these precons are like $80, and I'm like, is that good? You know, and I'm sitting there asking them questions, and of course the Millennium guys just assume that I know something about the game, so they're like, oh yeah, well this one over here, this Orzhov one, and I'm like, what the fuck is Orzhov? So I ended up picking out a Baldur's Gate precon, end of story, because I thought it was cool. It was the Izzet Go deck with the Dragon Commander.
Yeah, who? Because it wasn't Niv Mizzet.
It wasn't Niv Mizzet. Niv Mizzet was in the 99.
Yeah.
It was like Furkbrog or something.
Yeah.
And it was like, whenever this or another dragon attacks, goad all creatures, something like that.
Is it Go deck?
And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, well, this is a dragon. And I like blue. Because like I just had this idea in my head I was going to like blue, I guess. Mm-hmm. And so I bought the deck. And then I remember taking it out for the first time. And I didn't even think about this. I said, wait a second. Goad means you have to attack somebody else. But wait a second. We're the only ones playing this game. Yeah, I was like, did I mess up? And so I had like instant buyer's remorse when I got back because like I'd already cracked it. And I'm like, well, I can't return this now. Mm-hmm. So that eventually led me to, you know, we played a couple games, I think, but it was like pretty lackluster because like Goad is meant for the whole table. And you were like, I was sorting through the deck and you saw Niv Mizzet Perun and you were like, hey man, like it's in there because you can swap it out. Mm-hmm. So just swap out your commander maybe and see how it goes. Yeah. And I was like, all right, fine. And so I swapped it out to Niv Mizzet and I think the rest is history because do you want to go over that?
Those were some painful games. I was playing Risk the Redeemed. So I went from loving Atraxa to trying to find something that I would love just as much, and I misunderstood the populate mechanic pretty horribly because I assumed populate meant every single token gets another one, like proliferate with the counters, every counter gets another one. Nope, it's one token. So I was like, wow, man, this would be crazy. So I got like a bunch of cards for it, but they're all 1/1s. So I realized at this point in time when he's starting to switch over his deck to Niv Mizzet Perun and optimize it for Niv Mizzet Perun. So at around this time was when I found out how populate actually worked. So I'm making like 2 extra 1/1 tokens a turn, and then I would try and build up my board as fast as possible, but it almost was never fast enough because around like turn 6 or 7, sometimes turn 8, because you know you didn't have an optimized version of the deck to get all the correct pips out. Mm-hmm. But once you did, oh man, my entire board, it was like a board wipe with a commander. It was brutal. So I think especially once it was optimized, I don't think I won a game. I think we go like 15-1.
And that's like the people talk about the EDH rectification of this game. Mm-hmm. And I think to some extent it's true because I went online. What's the first resource that pops up? EDH Rec. Yeah. I click on Niv Mizzet Perun. What does it tell me? Look at all these fancy cards you can put in your deck. And I had no idea. So I was like, okay, literally anybody other than me knows more about the game.
Yep.
So I went to the decks section where people post their decks. Mm-hmm. And I think I found like a $75 deck. And I was like, okay, this is going to be big money for me to drop on this because I didn't know if I was going to be in the game.
Yeah.
I spent like $100 like with shipping and everything else. Yep. And I ordered the cards. They got here and I put the deck together. And because I didn't realize some of the interactions that Niv Mizzet actually has until I started playing a specific deck built around Niv Mizzet.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really when the pain train started rolling.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, for sure.
It was cool to see though that you learning the game actually taught me a lot about interaction, and even like the resource EDA track. I knew it was there. I had no idea that the decks part was there.
Mm-hmm.
So when you were like, oh yeah, you can just look at all the other decks that people have on this that are loaded up, and I was like, what?
Yeah.
So seeing that, and just I ended up learning a lot, but I also learned that Risk the Redeemed, horrible commander to have up against Niv Mizzet, and that's just, you know, there are decks that are more, I guess, cohesive now. I don't know. They're just decks that are better suited to face some decks than others, and mine was definitely not well suited to face Niv Mizzet.
I remember one of the highlights for me. Well, I have like 2 or 3 with Niv Mizzet, but one was understanding the text of the card. Where there was one time I just sat there reading it because I think we had like a discrepancy, like we were trying to figure out how this something worked. And I read it aloud, like maybe for like the first actual time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like whenever a player casts a spell, and I was like, oh my God, or an instant or sorcery.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, all of this time, I could have been putting you in the dirt even faster.
Yep.
So that was mind blowing for me. And there's so many like sneaky things that you can do with Niv Mizzet. In my Niv Mizzet video that I put out, I go over like the stack and understanding the stack. Mm-hmm. You and I just were like, I don't know how this actually falls. Just do it.
Yeah.
So like I think for you, especially because I was learning the game, you're like, whatever's more advantageous for you, man.
Yeah.
So like sometimes I probably hosed you unnecessarily when I shouldn't have. But I mean, that's just learning the game, you know?
Exactly, yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it was just kind of fun at that time, you know, learning everything. I remember, you know, when you were first looking at everything and learning the interactions, my first experience with an infinite combo was getting destroyed by Niv Mizzet and
Curiosity.
Yeah, is that the
enchantment?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So seeing that stuff was interesting and fun, and it just kind of taught me quite a bit about Magic because I'm very much of when I first started playing, I liked blue and black, but then quickly changed to green was like my pride and joy. So ever since then, I have been like creature based, but your deck being obviously instant sorcery with pinging effects kind of opened my eyes to different ways to enjoy the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to that first ever moment when I equipped Curiosity to Niv Mizzet, I just took somebody's deck list and I just put it together, and you know it worked fine. And I didn't understand why this enchantment was in there. I'm like, well, Niv Mizzet only triggers an instance and sorceries, and I'm like, also like, why is Tandem Lookout in here? That doesn't make any sense. Same effect, right? Until I did it, and then I said, okay, well, you know, I'll deal you 1 damage, and because I deal a damage, I'll draw a card, and then wait, I deal you another damage. I understand. You know what I mean? Like my jaw hit the floor. Like I couldn't believe it. And to that point of like broadening your horizon, it was like, I think we were, despite your background, it's like we were both just learning so much in that time about the game.
Yeah.
And this was like recent. This was like just a couple of years ago.
And I think part of that is because of how Magic has been changing ever since when I first started to play the game. Like, I don't know. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but back in like 2016, 2017, 2018, I feel like infinite combos were CEDH or they needed quite a few things to happen, and it was like most people focused on infinite mana from what I understood, or to be able to play the rest of their cards in their hand or draw more cards out of their deck to win the game, not just like Exquisite Blood and Sanguine Bond, not just stuff like that, which I'm sure existed, but that's just not something that my brother, his friend, and I did. We were very much like put creatures on the battlefield, buff them up, maybe have some tribal synergy. Like my brother's friend had an all angels deck. I think I don't even what's the really good angel? Is it Avacyn?
Avacyn.
I think it was an Avacyn deck.
Yep.
Um
Everything's indestructible.
yeah.
Which I thought, by the way, was broken.
Mm-hmm.
And until I learned Exile is
Yeah.
yeah.
So we were very much creatures based players.
Mm-hmm.
So I would not have understood a lot of these like interactions and mechanics unless we started playing.
And to your point from earlier, you're talking about how in the drought you would watch the prof or game nights, but both of them were probably only at like 30 to 100,000 subs at that time. And I watched a video recently going over there was some drama a while back. I was kind of doing my own personal research into other personalities in the MTG space for like maybe future episodes, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to name names, but somebody in the MTG sphere got really cut off from the game, I think rightly so, about 7 years ago. And the prof did a video on it, and he was like, you are one of the biggest MTG YouTubers. And he put up a snippet of this person's subs, and it was like 9,000 or 10,000.
Wow.
That was big. Only 6 years ago. Like, wow. That is how far this hobby has come. And also to the point of when you were playing with your brother, EDH Rec didn't even exist, let alone like the game of Commander. You weren't really playing Commander, I don't think, right? I mean, maybe to some extent.
Do you mean when I first started playing the game or when I first played Commander?
No, when you first started playing the game.
When I first started playing the game, EDH Rec may have existed. I just did not know about it because I remember when I started playing Commander, I remember looking at Atraxa online. Vaguely.
Sure.
But yeah, like I had no idea what Commander was. I thought Magic was just, your typical 40s or 60 card deck. I can't exactly remember what those pre-made starter packs had, but I thought that was it. And it was fun, but it's not as much fun in my opinion as Commander.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a very small community. Like I'd mention it to people and no one knew what it was.
Right.
Yeah.
You grew up in a small town though.
Yeah.
So I mean, I grew up in a small town. Hi, how you doing? You grew up in a small town as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that speaks to the experience for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Which is like my class size was 30 kids. My graduating class size.
That's wild.
And I mean, yours was a little bit larger,
yeah,
but not substantially.
Mine was only like 56, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like, 56.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of people watching are like, that's laughable. Like I had like 900 or 1,000 kids in my graduating class, right?
Yeah.
Like easily. So it's harder in some ways, but also easier because you have a wider breadth of people available and personalities available to you.
Yes.
Locked in the same building
mm-hmm.
in those formative years.
Yep.
So you're probably more likely to find somebody that has that type of personality or like, whatever it is that gets them into MTG, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had that experience when I went to college, which was experiencing like these huge like game groups. Like the biggest club on my campus was for like board games and card games.
Really?
By a massive margin. Like
wow.
I went there multiple times, and it's like they booked out the largest possible venue, which basically was like this cafeteria space essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how big it was necessarily, but it felt like almost like a football field sized area. And it was just filled with people playing.
Wow.
So
that's wild.
Yeah. So I didn't get that experience with 30 people. And it sounds like you didn't either.
Yeah, definitely
56.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely not.
And how was that for you, like growing up? Like, did that in some ways impact you? And I also maybe want to rope in here too. You're a person that toes the line between being somebody who is both athletic and, I mean, you're playing collegiate sports and somebody who can sit down with a bunch of people who are like, hi, I'm a music major. You know what I mean? You can sit down with both groups. You connect with both of them. How does that work for you? Do you feel like that stresses you out? Do you feel like it gives you energy? Like,
honestly, like I'd say neither. growing up, I was very much part of the popular kids crew, I guess, but like I also did dance growing up. I loved Lord of the Rings. I read Hobbit probably 3 times a year. So, I was like, oh, people probably would have counted me as like a weird kid up until I started being good at sports. But once I kind of found my rhythm with sports, and I always try to be as nice as I can to people. I always try and find things to connect with people, just because I don't see the point in constantly being at odds with someone, walking up and making predetermined assumptions. That just creates problems, and that's just not something that I did. So with all like my background, and like my dad ran the light and sound for musicals. He was the director for one of our school musicals. So I grew up watching old musicals from the 1940s, 1950s. So just having my hands on a lot of different things, I feel just allowed me to understand, first of all, how to treat people well, especially because I was in that position of, kind of being a kid that people may have, maybe tried to stay away from until I was cool with like the popular kids. Like, let's be real, it's high school.
Yeah. Yep.
So until then, I just knew that I wanted to be nice to people. I tried my best to connect with everyone around me, and at some points it was a little tiring, I'd say.
Yeah.
Especially when, like, if you're talking with someone that you don't really have that much connection with, like personally, like if I talk to people who only played sports, like and there was a part of me that felt like I was hiding who I truly was.
Yeah.
Until I kind of got to college, because I found a bunch of people that would love Star Wars and loved Lord of the Rings, but also loved playing soccer. So like, and that's who my friend group in college is right now. Like it's those guys. But for a while, maybe it was, adolescent years making me feel like that. Maybe it was because I actually was, but that to a certain extent, you feel like you have to hide the fact that you play Magic the Gathering, hide the fact that you play D&D, hide the fact that you enjoy reading fantasy novels. And you share, like, I was able to share it with my close friends, but it's not something that I tried to talk about a lot, So
Yeah.
it was kind of like a two different personalities based on who I was with situation, but nothing that ever like really truly bothered me. I would say
There's a great quote that I like, and it goes something like, "Nothing in life is meant to be feared, only understood." And I think that speaks volumes, to the situation too. Simply understanding the issue, I think, is a majority of the battle.
Yeah.
Or like understanding the person that's behind it. For me, being in medicine, it's very important for me not to be biased toward people that come in. And I worked in the inner city in Rochester for 3 years. And that was a very transformative experience, just seeing what true poverty really looks like. And it gave me this crazy experience that a 20-something, probably many 20-somethings, at least in our current system, maybe don't get, which is the humility, I suppose, that comes along with understanding that it's just people at the end of the day, right? And like, you're just, by the merits of you being a person, I think that affords you my time and like sitting down with you as a medical provider, right? You're not going to be pushed away. And I think that's really important. And I think for the MTG sphere, that's something I really strongly believe in as well. Yeah. I'll sit down with anybody in a pod and play with you. I don't care what you look like, what you sound like, what your accent is. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm sitting down to play a game with a person, and that person deserves that respect, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think as a kid, you don't know that.
Yeah.
You know, you're not nuanced enough to understand that.
Yeah.
So now as adults, we can look back and maybe be happy about it, that it happened, and we have this perspective, a little bit bitter about it. Where do you fall? Do you feel like that was actually helpful for you? Do you feel like it was harmful for you? What do you think?
I think overall it was helpful. I think sometimes I feel like maybe I overexhausted myself, and it's kind of led me to be a little more closed off now. You know, I still feel like I'm a pretty personable guy, and I can talk to whoever without having really an issue. But whereas before, I wouldn't really have a problem with it. Now it's just like I almost have become a little bit introverted as a result.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm glad that I'm able to talk to people like I am,
Right.
and able to relate to most people, and also like understand that I also enjoy helping people. So
Yeah.
being able to, you know, be someone that is approachable, that if someone's having an issue, they can come talk to me. Like that was kind of my role in high school a lot. Less so now, just because obviously I don't know everyone in college the way that you end up knowing your class when it's that small.
For sure.
But yeah, overall, I'd say I'm happy about how it went and how it turned out.
Well, I think this isn't just for the video, but I think that you have a wonderful approach to life because you're a very empathetic person.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell that you put yourself in the shoes of others first, right? And that's a really, really hard trait. I think some people have it naturally, but it's a really hard trait to build.
Yeah.
To some extent, I think I had that too. And I think back to an experience I had in my third year of college, which also happened to be my first year of my master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
And in that time, we went to a museum and they sat us down in front of paintings and they were like, look at the painting and tell me what you see, right? And so we'd sit there and we would say like, oh, I see a man with his child, whatever. And they're like, no. Tell me what makes up the man, or tell me something about the man, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, well, he has a mustache. And they're like, no. Even further, like as basic as you can get. Tell me about this picture. And I'm like, I mean, I guess they use vertical brush strokes for like his torso. And they go, good. What color is the paint, right? And it's sort of like deconstructing it because we look at something, we have a preconceived notion about what that thing is.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't take into account most of the time the infinitesimal, innumerable brushstrokes that make up a person.
Mm-hmm.
So when you make these heavy-handed decisions about people and who they are, I think it's very detrimental to a conversation, to maybe that person's day or life for you making a comment about it. You really never know when you could be making a difference for that person. Yeah. And that's just for random people, not just your friends. Like being a good friend, a lot of times comes down to being an empathetic person. Yeah. And I think you have that trait. So just putting that out there. So let's pivot a little bit here. I think now is as good a time as ever to talk about your decks a little bit, because you did mention in the past, you were definitely a player who primarily relied on, I'm going to summon big creature. I make big creature bigger and I swing.
Big boys with big stomp. Yeah, that's what I liked.
So now we are going to do a deck audit. I'm not sure if this video is going to be up before or after we do a deck audit, but we're recording on the same day. So hi, everyone. And I want to maybe start with Azuri, because Azuri Claw of Progress is a Simic deck that you have. It revolves around experience counters on your commander, and then those experience counters during combat transfer to +1/+1 counters. What drew you to that deck? or what do you still like about that deck? We don't have to go into a ton of detail because we're going to do a more
Yeah.
in-depth breakdown about it, but just briefly, what do you like about it?
Essentially, I had my brother when I went down to Tennessee, maybe like 10th grade. I had a choice between a Goreclaw deck and Azuri. I should have chosen, hindsight, Goreclaw. However, I chose Azuri, and that was just because I still had so much love and just I don't know, good memories from playing Atraxa, that Azuri was the closest to Atraxa because he had sold Atraxa.
Yeah, it was expensive as
Yeah,
all hell back then.
Yeah, it was. It was back when Atraxa was probably like $60
at least,
just herself.
Yeah.
So he sold the whole deck, but Azuri was the closest of the two to Atraxa, and since I loved playing Atraxa so much, I was like, I'm gonna love Azuri just as much. So that's kind of how I chose to play Azuri, and why I still have it, because it still does have like a soft spot for me, or like in my heart, because my brother gave it to me back in like 10th grade.
Yeah. And they came out with some dope new art recently.
Yes.
The watercolor version.
Yes.
So, I mean, that helps.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we don't have to go into too much more detail about this. We are going to break this deck a little bit on the, deck audit that you're all hopefully have seen or will see.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move on to another one. Let's talk about Prosper. So Prosper, I saw this fun comment on a Reddit post, maybe 3 years ago. I think it was 3 years ago. And people were asking, like, what do you want to see in the Rakdos color pie? And the Redditor, who I don't have the post, I'm sorry, said something akin to, I think that Rakdos really needs to move in a more treasure-heavy focus in order to have any chance of being remotely competitive.
Interesting.
Like, that's what's missing.
Mm-hmm.
And shortly thereafter, I think it must have been just a couple months after, Prosper gets released, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Prosper has really defined the Rakdos meta in a lot of ways.
Yes.
And I think Prosper alone is like the design decision from Wizards. We're going to take Rakdos this direction.
Yes.
Impulse draw, treasures, Black has all the tutoring and all that good stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is Prosper in a nutshell.
Yes.
When you first got Prosper, how was that? Was it through a pre-con? How did you get Prosper? How did that start?
I pre-ordered the pre-con because every time a set would come out, I would watch some sort of review of a new card, and one of the first cards that was revealed, I believe, was Prosper, and I think it was probably the Command Zone.
Yeah, probably.
I probably watched the Command Zone, and they were really excited about the card, and I was like, I mean, the same. Okay, this is the same for. Oh man, what was that morph deck? I did the same thing for the morph deck. Yep, I did the same thing for the poison counter deck, which that name is failing me right now. But same thing for Prosper. So those were like, I would always look for newer type mechanics that I thought were niche and cool. So that's how I found Prosper, and I pre-ordered it immediately.
Yeah, turns out it's not so niche anymore.
yeah.
At the time it was,
mm-hmm.
but not anymore. I remember watching an interview with somebody where they talked about Prosper, and they're like, "Yeah, I don't think this is going to be a really good commander." And it's like, boy, were you proved wrong, right?
Yeah, for real.
Crazy. So your Prosper deck has gone through multiple different iterations as well, and it was only recently. I think it was you watched my video. You said that I did on Prosper, and that was like your decision to say, "Okay, I know what I need to do now in order to make this guy really tick."
Mm-hmm.
And so you went ahead and bought the cards. I don't even think all of them have arrived yet, right?
No, I just got a text from my parents actually that Plarg and Nasari came in. So
nice.
I think that might be one of the last ones besides Sensei's Divining Top.
Yeah.
But I was taking care of my girlfriend after she got her wisdom teeth out, and while she was napping from like just to rest, I saw your video and I was like, well, I do need to change the cards out, and I was like, this one might this one might be about my deck. So I clicked on it, watched it, I looked at the Architect deck lists,
Mm-hmm.
and then when I was buying cards, chose the ones within my price range out of those. So yeah, that video really helped. But pretty soon. Now I only have the Plarganasari. Oh man, what's the word?
Top deck manipulation. I don't know.
Nope,
Yeah.
it's having a card in there. That's not the card.
Impulse draw.
Nope,
Exile.
it's what you just made a video on.
Oh, proxy.
Proxy. Jeez.
Yeah.
Okay.
My famous proxy video.
Yep. So now I just have that proxy in there and Sensei's Divining Top. But we also had made decisions to put different cards in there at one point, and that was the last time I was able to play. So half the cards in there aren't the ones that I bought because they weren't the ones that were finally decided upon in the video, because there were better options. So I've honestly kind of put off playing Prosper until I get everything, but I cannot wait because Prosper is probably one of my favorite decks.
Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah, you always have a lot of fun when you play Prosper.
I love playing with myself because that's what it would be. I would literally just sit there, build up my board, and have no way to close out the game. So I would just tell people that I was just going to play with myself when I would pull this deck out to play it.
Somebody put this man in a YouTube short, play with myself. You also built a new deck, Teysa Karlov, which she's an older commander, but Orzhov, I think Teysa falls under some scrutiny for sort of being like, it's not like the de facto Orzhov good stuff commander, but you can really just slam all of like the good like Orzhov staples in there. Like, I'm going to run every tutor. I'm going to run Smothering Tithe and light, everything that you can fit in there. And that really kits out the deck to be really lethal. But you took a different approach because you're also building on somewhat of a budget too.
Yes.
So how has your experience been with Teysa being in a more budget realm?
It's been pretty good. I think right now that it's kind of going in a little too many directions. Because I have some recursion, I have token generation, and I also have the sack outlets that you need for it. So I'm kind of thinking that I need to choose either strictly token or regeneration for that deck for it to really take the next step, because I was finding out last night actually that there were a lot of times where it takes me so long to either hope that I get the card that I need, or I just like it. I could sacrifice the thing that I can regenerate, but then I can only do that once or twice per turn, or I can get a bunch of tokens and then really be able to go off, but then run out of gas really quick.
Yeah.
So right now it's kind of finding that balance between, and I honestly think it, I think it really also is me learning how to play the deck.
Yeah, for sure.
Saving those guys and like using the regeneration maybe to as like gas to try and keep drawing into the stuff that I really need, because when I have my board set up with Teysa and everything that I need, like I was using Skull Clamp last night, for example. I drew 12 cards in one turn by killing 3 creatures.
Yeah.
And paying 3 mana. So, and just having like that kind of stuff. And then I was able to regenerate it out, kill the creature that had Afterlife 2, create 4 more tokens. So kind of deciding, it's almost like deciding when to pick my battles. You kind of, you lay under the radar for most of the time.
Yeah. And I think that this is an issue that is not specific to you and your Teysa deck. I had this exact same problem when I built Moira and Teshar. And I felt so bad because Allie, my fiance, she really wanted a deck in that category to play. And it was the same situation where Moira and Teshar, if you blink the creature, because it's going into exile when you bring it back with her ability, if you blink that creature, you get to keep it forever. So like it's the easiest, cheesiest like thing that you can do is play like a Mishra's Bauble, an Urza's Bauble, a Lotus Petal, or any of the fast mana, which I don't include in there, but any fast mana, as an artifact to trigger Moira and Teshar to bring back like one of the huge big threats out of your graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
And I was focused too much on one thing, which was blinking. I'm like, oh, well, clearly I need to blink these things. So I'm going to put 12 cards that blink in there. And then, what that does effectively is dilute your ability to include cheap methods of bringing things back with Moira and Teshar.
Mm-hmm.
It eliminates your ability to include bigger threats in order to get those out of the graveyard in the first place.
Yes.
And it also eliminates your ability to incorporate more cards to mill yourself or get things into the graveyard. So like pulling your deck in too many different directions led to this conundrum where just cutting like 8 cards, or like I think we cut it like 10, so we only have 2 blink spells in there, made the deck from like a 5 or like a 6 power scale, because it just didn't really work that well, to like a super powerful casual deck where it just like dominates at the table whenever it's played. So I think you'll find the balance somewhere with Teysa as well. And I think it's probably going to be, as you play it more, identifying which of those pieces is not as necessary and trimming that back and doubling down on another. That's probably going to be where you find your success.
And I already have kind of an idea of where it's going to be, with Reveliark. And, man, there's another... What? Yeah, I don't remember the name of the card. It's another...
Is it Karmic Guide?
Karmic Guide, yeah. Karmic Guide and Reveliark. Every time I have them in there, yes, they're kind of useful, but for 5 mana each, kind of tough, unless I have Ashnod's Altar, which I did, luckily, last game. So I think taking those out, maybe more token generation, probably more creatures with Afterlife, which is the mechanic that came out when Teysa Karlov was released. Which is actually part of the reason why I wanted to make Teysa Karlov. It was just because I've only bought 3 booster box ever. One was Double Masters, one was War of the Spark, and the other one was the one that Teysa Karlov came out in, which was the one right before War of the Spark, I believe. And I pulled Teysa Karlov out of that, which caused me to want to play it. So I think I have maybe 2 other creatures that I can put in there that I already own. I mean, they're like 12 cents, maybe, that I should replace. And then maybe replace one of the recursion with another sack outlet and one with an Afterlife. And I think then maybe it'll play a little bit smoother.
What other decks have we not talked about? You did have Edgar Markov, but that's been deconstructed temporarily because of the crazy price increase in Edgar Markov.
That's actually what helped build the Teysa deck.
But what else do you have available? I forget. Am I missing one?
Aowen.
Aowen. Yeah. That deck slaps too.
Yeah, I love that deck.
Yeah.
Love that deck. That was I don't know. That one was my solution. If you like tokens, that's my solution for having a good, not my wizard solution probably, for having a good token deck, in my opinion. Because you basically can, I make 2 tokens every turn that can immediately attack, which was one of the things that we found out was the problem with Risk the Redeemed, was that I'd have this explosive turn where I bring out 100, where I could have brought out 100 tokens in one turn. None of them can attack. Most of them get wiped from the ridiculous interaction that you were able to make with Niv Mizzet.
Yeah.
And then, I'd be back at square one. But with Aowen, they come out, you can immediately attack. You can pump them pretty easily. So it's basically like human tribal is what...
I don't know what your opinion is on this, but decks like Riss or other ones that go extremely wide, that just want to build up like hundreds of tokens, tend to get a ton of heat. Because when you have that, there's a clear win condition sitting on the board. Or if you've done it enough to people know that this commander is going to do some stupid stuff. So they just keep a board wipe in hand, or they remove your commander early so you can't get there in the first place. But with Aowen, she's a little innocuous. Like, it doesn't just slap you in the face right away.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, let me make just 2 tokens. That's fine, right?
Yeah.
But by the way, those are humans, and that's going to synergize with like my pump effects and everything else in the deck. It's just sneaky.
Yeah.
Like Aowen just sneaks up on you, and then all of a sudden you get smashed in the face for like 80 damage or more.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that's maybe not talked about a lot, is like just the psychology of the game. Because when you see hundreds of tokens, like the alarm bells start ringing. But Aowen's hit me for like 80 in the past, and still I'll sit down at the table with you playing Aowen, and I'm like, oh, it's fine.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And then I'll be like, shit, this was not fine.
Yeah.
It was never fine.
Yeah. Like, for example, what I did yesterday. There's an enchantment where I don't remember the name, but it's in that precon. It's each other attacking creature gets a +1/+0 for each attacking creature gets a +1/+0 for each other attacking creature that shares a creature type with it.
Shared animosity.
Shared animosity, yes,
Yeah.
that's what it is. So I had that out originally. Brought Aowen out the turn after. Then the next turn, put Grand Abolisher down.
Yep. So you lock it.
And then I put down that card that's 4 white/red pips, all 4 pips. That gives all creatures double strike.
Yep.
And I ended up taking 2 people from like, one was at like 29 health down to 6 health.
Yeah.
And the other one was at 20 health down to 4.
Right.
And I would have been able to bring someone else further down, but it was the Moira and Tashar deck, and I didn't want any of my creatures to die. But like out of nowhere, my tokens were 8 power. Aowen was 14 power. Grand Abolisher would have been 8 power as well.
Right.
Same with that other card that I had. So like out of nowhere, it really can just swing out for a ridiculous amount of damage, just because of the interaction between the cards themselves that are nuanced, I think, just enough for people you're playing to not fully understand what's going on until it's happening.
Right.
So,
well, it's also like, if there's only, psychologically for me, I'm like, well, there's only 5 creatures out on the board, and they're all little right now. I don't know if I need to board wipe. Like, is now a good time to board wipe? I don't know. It's harder to make a calculated decision against the Aowen deck versus like a more heavy token deck, where it's like, clearly I don't need to wipe this. Like, they're just 1/1s and you have 10 of them. But even if you hit a pump effect, I have enough block. Like, you know what I mean? It's more calculated and easy. But with Aowen, it's like, is he going to get something out there that I just can't deal with? Like, do I need to wipe this right now? Or like, do I need to waste my removal spell on Aowen when there's these other threats that are on the board, right?
Yeah.
And like, not to mention, once you start including cards like Grand Abolisher, it makes that decision so much more complex, because it's like, he's just going to have his way with me.
Yeah.
Like, on his turn. So now I have to really decide. So I think that's another thing about Aowen. It's harder for me to calculate what the right move is.
And it definitely does help that Aowen's a human, because then you can just put human good stuff in it. Because that's what I found is like, I'll try and put I'll put like Grand Abolisher, for example. Part of the reason that that's in there isn't even to protect my stuff on my turn. It's to make people use their removal or their counter spells before I do the thing that I really want to do, and end up to like get myself to the point where I will be able to win the game.
Right. Like, you kind of, it's almost like a diversion.
Yeah.
You like play something early. You're like, remove me. And then it's like, you activated my trap card.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yep. Totally. You're also, I think it's something that people won't know unless they actually sit down in a pod with you, which is you're a very kind player. So like, you will divvy up the damage very equitably. So you'll be like, I'm going to, like you mentioned before, I'll leave you at 4. I'll leave you at 6. I could have killed you.
Yeah.
But hey, take an extra turn, see what happens. You know, you're somebody that I think enjoys the flow of the game, and you enjoy having people engaged in the game.
Yeah.
And I think that's also another part that makes playing with you enjoyable, because it's not just like, yeah, motherfucker, I'm going to just crush you right here, right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to take you out of the game, and you're just going to have to sit there and watch for hours. So I think that also is one of those things where you probably could convert on more games if you just singled somebody out. But I don't think that's your personality.
Yeah, no, just because like sometimes I'll get a little salty if I like absolutely get destroyed in the beginning. But like, obviously at the end of the day, it's a game. But also like, sometimes it like if I really want to win, then I'll try and be a little more cutthroat. But I usually end up just feeling better when everyone gets to do what their deck wants to do, and then we'll just see. Everyone has this massive board. We'll just see what the fuck happens.
Right.
So that's kind of the play style that I've started to lean into a little bit more, just because then I know everyone is enjoying their time with their deck.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
And there isn't a whole lot of feels bad situations.
Yep. So what comes next for you? Do you have an idea for another deck you're building, or?
I have been looking. So I mentioned before that I thought when I first started that I was going to really love black and blue.
Yeah.
So I think my next move is going to be a Dimir Commander.
Yeah.
I was thinking of Anwan, the Ruin Sage, before I built Teysa. But I don't really know. That was one that just kind of stuck out to me. I would love to build Atraxa. That's the end goal.
Yeah.
But just the lands, I don't want it to be clunky, and the lands are just a little too expensive for a college student. So that one's for the future. So I think I'm just gonna focus on maybe a Dimir Commander of some sort.
I think 2-color is great.
Yeah,
because you have a lot more consistency. If you're really that strapped, you just run basics. It doesn't really matter, and you don't lose a significant amount of power in the deck itself. So I think that would be great, just doing like a Dimir Commander for sure.
Yeah, or maybe a big mana green stompy deck or big mana Selesnya deck.
Just play old Gnawbone.
Yeah, that was one of your original decks actually.
Which one was that?
Karametra?
Oh,
Karametra?
yeah. I never even talked about this. Nobody knows that this deck existed, but it was a Selesnya big creature deck, and all it was, my idea was like, I am a genius. I'm going to build Karametra, pause for dramatic effect, Eldrazi. So I remember I placed the initial order, and I was like, am I really doing this? Am I about to drop $400 on these cards? And I was like, of course I am. And so I placed the order, I get it, and I'm playing with it, and I'm like, oh yeah, this feels good. And I'm like, Kodama's Reach, Cultivate, Wild Growth, whatever I was playing at the time. And then Karametra comes out, and it's like adding even more value. And I'm like, oh, I'm unstoppable. Get to like 11 mana. I'm like, oh yeah, turn 6, 11 mana. And then I tap out for like an Ulamog, and you're like, Path to Exile.
Yep.
And I'm like, whoa, but I just spent 6 turns only ramping. What do you mean you stopped me? So yeah, I mean, also I was playing Karametra a lot of like 1v1 situations, which probably didn't help.
Yeah.
But to be fair, Karametra has been outclassed by a lot of other commanders. And then I pivoted and I built Atlapalani, and Atlapalani really slaps.
Yeah,
so,
it does.
But
do you still have Atlapalani?
Yeah, it hasn't been brought out in a long time.
I was gonna say.
Mostly because there's certain decks that my fiance really gravitates toward, and that used to be one of them. But I try to avoid, I don't want to say like playing her decks, because there are decks like collectively.
Yeah.
But when she has that special connection with the deck, like I want her to, do the thing with it. Like that makes it almost more enjoyable for me, is when I see her winning with the deck and she's like laughing or having fun.
Yeah.
Like I would rather see that than me like win a game.
No,
you know?
I completely understand that. Like I was just playing a game with Sarah.
Yeah.
And I told myself, it was pretty late, so I told myself, all right, I'm not going to board wipe, right? Cuz she was way outclassing my deck.
Yeah.
And I completely forgot that I wasn't going to board wipe. So I played the board wipe, right? And that's when she pulls out Heroic Intervention.
Yep.
Which is a card that I meant to get her at Millennium, but it was in the Doctor Who precon, which I remembered, so I gave it to her. And like seeing that work, seeing it, like her stuff get protected, because it was Wrath of God.
Yeah.
So seeing everything get protected and her saving the game plan and her deck doing what it wants, it like does bring me a lot of joy to see that happen.
Yeah.
So I definitely understand.
Well, also I think that for some people, I don't know how Sarah is, but for Allie, she doesn't love the deck building process, but she loves playing. right?
Yeah.
So like for us, like we get some enjoyment because it's like, yeah, I built that,
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think that at least is some solace for us,
Yeah.
in the event that we get crushed by our own decks. It's like, well,
Yeah.
I built it, so
Mhm.
it's fine, it's fine.
Yeah, definitely.
But I've been really proud of Allie lately because she's definitely a bit further along in the Magic journey than Sarah is.
Mhm.
And Allie has started to dip into some of the more complicated commanders. She's like, give me Orvar. Like if we play
Wow.
one-on-one, and she'll play Orvar. And she's still learning, but it's impressive to see her like pilot the deck.
Mhm.
And she got to a point where she was like, oh yeah, I think I win, right? And she plays out all of her Peregrine Drakes and does the infinite combo with Orvar bouncing in infinitely. And she's like, now I'll just take my extra turn, like, and attack you for 1 billion,
Yikes.
like, so it's cool to see like her brain, her magic brain evolving.
Mhm.
And I think this is something like Mark talks about too with his kids. Like, she's not my kid, let me be very clear.
Yeah.
But she's a new brain in MTG.
Mhm.
His kids learn Magic the Gathering, and I think it's very interesting. It's an interesting perspective for him to have a new little being
Mhm.
educated in MTG and watching them develop these like complex decisions as they age.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's pretty cool. And I think you'll probably get some of that too with Sarah as well.
Yeah.
As more time goes on, you'll start to see her making more complex plays,
Mhm.
once she branches out a little bit in the deck choice.
Yeah. And even with Kyler, 'cause that's the deck that she has.
Selesnya +1/+1
Yeah,
counter.
was in the 99 of Autumn Sovereign,
Like a Crimson Vow deck or something,
yeah.
right?
But that deck has a lot more, especially when you get a bunch of like ETB effects
Mhm.
with creatures. So she's definitely getting a lot better with picking up on all those effects, making sure that all the creatures are working, and also ordering what's coming out, so that way everything is getting as big as possible and getting I guess the most bang for the buck of what she's playing that turn.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
yeah, I'm definitely proud that because she's been playing for she's maybe played 20 times, 30
Yeah,
times.
Sure.
So being able to pick up on something that ended up being more complicated than I originally thought,
Mm-hmm.
because Kyler is the commanders, but then the counter, but then is an anthem effect for everything else,
Right,
and then some things
right.
have an anthem effect. So, like being able to decipher between the anthem effects and the counters, and she's doing a really good job with picking up on everything. And
I think she is too.
Yeah, especially for only playing for not very long, like a couple months.
On God.
For real. Yeah.
So should we go to our Zoomer section?
Sure, yeah.
All right. So for those of you that don't know, if you made it this far in the video, you're locked in.
Yeah.
And you're ready for the Zoomer lingo section.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, I know that 50% of you are over the age of 30. I guarantee that half of you don't understand what's about to be said.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to go through 3 levels, easy, medium, and hard, of Zoomer lingo.
Okay. With
some relation to MTG. And I'm going to just say it, and you have to decipher what it means in regular speech.
Yeah,
okay. not Zoomer lingo, okay?
Okay.
All right, this is our easy level. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
For real, this card is straight bussin'.
That means that I'm not lying. This card is really, really good.
Wow, you nailed it.
Yeah.
All right, hold on. Yeah, our score. All right, you ready for your next round?
Oh yeah.
This is your medium level.
Mm-hmm.
They said I couldn't bring Zoomer talk into a Magic the Gathering interview, but let me cook, homie, on God.
So they said that I couldn't use new lingo, right? But allow me to start speaking in such a way continuously that is this Zoomer language.
That's a point for Thaddeus.
Yeah, it is.
All right. Here's your hard level.
Okay.
This one I feel very proud of this one. You ready?
Okay.
This finna require a PhD in Rizology, high key, Edgar Markov is a snack, no cap. Like sheesh, he got that drip and now living rent-free in my head. The reprint also going to be hitting different for my goat, Ong Fur.
Okay, I might have to read this one as I decipher it because only. Okay. So this will require some good communication of the flirtatious type, Rizology. High key is like very true. Edgar Markov is a snack, sexy. No cap, not lying. Since he looks good and has good clothes, I will be thinking about him religiously, with him not having to do anything in return. This reprint is going to be so good for him because he is one of the greatest commanders of all time. On God, for real, which just means very true. I'm a professional Zoomer.
I'm proud of you.
Oh, thank you.
I'm 26 years old. Thad, as we slowly drift off into the final sections of our interview here, is there anything that we've missed so far that you wanted to go into?
I think we touched upon this, but one thing that I did want to say was just like Magic the Gathering is a good vessel for getting to know people better and becoming better friends with people. Like, we were pretty good friends before Magic, but ever since we started playing, I feel like we've gotten a lot closer.
For sure.
And have spent a lot more time with each other because, again, we've had that excuse to be able to hang out with each other and have something that we're going to be able to do for hours, right? Same thing for like playing on the Xbox with people, except it's together, face to face.
Right.
And I just think Magic has been very important in building my relationships personally, because since it's something that I enjoy so much, being able to introduce it to the people who are important to me and have them enjoy it not only means a lot, but helps kind of, because I can get kind of anxious in social settings, right?
Sure.
So, and also I get bored quite easily, but having something that I know that I'm going to be able to do with someone for hours makes it easier to go places and be able to hang out, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I just think it's been a very important part. And since I love it so much, when I introduce it to people, like that's how I know if that's part of the ways that like I'll be able to know if they're going to be in my life for a while.
Yeah.
So like same thing with Sarah. Like she loves playing it, and it was important to me that she enjoyed it.
Right.
Obviously, if she didn't, I wasn't gonna gonna be pissed.
Yeah.
But
the fact that she took a liking to it.
Yeah, the fact that she enjoys it and playing it, like, especially because like couples my age will not have things to do, you know, like it's for some reason hard for people to find things to do my age.
Yeah.
So having Magic that we both enjoy playing is important for me and means a lot to me that we both like it. We always have something to do, and especially when it's the winter, because when you can't always go skiing, can't go hiking in the winter. You can, but I do not want to do that. So yeah, that working out, you know, it this game has turned from something that was just a bond between my brother and I, has now flowered into something that is a bond between me and all of the people that are important to me.
Right. And I couldn't agree more. I think you're a teacher at heart, a gentleman at the table.
Thank you.
An empathetic young man on a good path. And hopefully, I mean, people move away, times change, and I love the time that we have right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate the people that we have with us that kind of come along the journey.
Mm-hmm.
As time goes on, I hope that the good spirit, that we put out like with the group, hopefully either infatuates others to do the same with their own,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe allows more people to get into our group that we also enjoy being with and promoting that positive atmosphere. It's just enjoyable and fun to be around.
Mm-hmm.
So here's to the next leg of the journey, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Thad, I can't think of a better way to end the interview.
Yeah.
Other than saying that, on God, for real, I love you.
On God, for real, I love you too, man.
All right, brother. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Ugh. That's it. Click off the video. Bye. Nice job, man.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's my second podcast ever.